I never thought I'd end up working the night shift at a Waffle House, but life has a funny way of forcing you into places you swore you'd never be. After my car broke down and my landlord threatened eviction, I took the first job I could find. Midnight to 8 a.m., Highway 27, somewhere between Dalton and Rome, Georgia. A lonely stretch of road flanked by pine trees and silence. My first warning should have been how eager they were to hire me. No background check, no drug test. The manager, a woman named Shirley, who looked like she'd smoked her way through 3 divorces, barely even asked questions. She just slid a paper across the table and told me to sign. "Now, before you start," she said, narrowing her mascara-smudged eyes, "you gotta follow the rules here. The night rules. You break 'em, you're out. Or worse." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She didn't laugh back. She pulled out an index card from her apron and slapped it on the table, handwritten in red ink, stained at the edges. "Waffle House night shift rules. Do not break one. Don't look at the man sitting in booth 9. He'll be there between 12:13 a.m. and 12:53 a.m. Just walk past him. If he speaks, ignore him. 2. If someone knocks on the back door, don't open it, no matter how much they beg. 3. Between 3 and 3:17 a.m., turn off all the lights and stand still. Don't speak. Don't breathe loud. 4. If you hear someone whispering your name from the kitchen freezer, don't answer. They're not talking to you. 5. The jukebox will sometimes start playing on its own. If it plays anything that ain't country, unplug it immediately. 6. If the sun rises and the windows are still dark, leave without clocking out. I stared at the card, waiting for the punchline. "You're serious?" I asked. "As a heart attack," she replied. "Follow the rules, you'll be fine." Maybe I was desperate, maybe I was stupid, but I pocketed the card and clocked in anyway. The cook that night was a quiet old man named Russell. Didn't smile, didn't blink much either. He just flipped bacon with robotic precision, his eyes fixed somewhere far away. The only other employee was a waitress named Crystal, a chain smoker with a voice like gravel in a blender. She didn't talk much unless it was to complain about something. The first hour passed normally. Couple truckers, one drunk college kid, a suspiciously energetic preacher who tipped in scripture pamphlets instead of cash. The whole time I kept glancing at booth 9, waiting for something to happen. It was empty. Until it wasn't. At exactly 12:13 a.m., not a second before or after, I turned from the register and nearly dropped the glass I was holding. The booth was occupied. I didn't see him sit down. One moment it was empty. The next, there he was. A tall man in a black suit, pale as frost, sitting unnaturally still. His hands were folded on the table. No food, no drink, no expression. My first thought was that he was sick. My second thought was that he wasn't human. His skin wasn't just pale, it was translucent, veins mapped beneath like blue wire. His eyes were fixed forward, not looking at anything, not blinking. I froze. Crystal, wiping tables nearby, didn't even look up. "Walk past him," she muttered without moving her lips. "Don't stare." My legs felt heavy as I shuffled past the booth, pretending to check the napkin dispensers. He didn't move, didn't breathe, as far as I could tell. Then, as I passed, he turned his head toward me. "Do you know what time it is?" he asked. His voice wasn't right. Too smooth, too calm, like wind through a hollow pipe. I didn't answer. I kept walking. "Do you know," he repeated, "what time it is?" My pulse hammered in my ears. Every instinct screamed to run. Instead, I kept wiping napkins, pretending not to hear. Crystal grabbed my wrist hard as I passed her, whispering without looking at me. "He ain't talking to you. He's just trying to see if you'll break." I didn't look back. I didn't breathe until I was behind the counter again. At 12:53 a.m., I heard the faint squeak of the booth shifting, followed by footsteps. When I looked up, booth 9 was empty again. He was gone. No door chime. No reflection in the windows. Just gone. I tried to steady my hands, pretending to clean a coffee pot. Crystal lit another cigarette and said, "You did good. Most new ones panic." "What happens if someone talks to him?" I asked. She took a drag, blew smoke, and said nothing. The night dragged on. I tried to convince myself it was some elaborate prank, that Shirley hired actors to scare rookies. But then Rule 2 came into play. At 1:40 a.m., someone knocked on the back door, soft at first, then louder. "Hey, I'm locked out, let me in!" I froze mid-wipe on the counter. It was a woman's voice, young, scared, then crying. "Please," she whimpered, I'm hurt. Something's out here. Please let me in. I took a step toward the hall leading to the back door. Russell appeared from the kitchen like a ghost, his fist slamming onto the stainless steel counter so hard the salt shakers rattled. Don't, he said firmly. I swallowed. But what if she ain't nothing but a voice? That's all. The knocking grew frantic, then scratching, like fingernails dragging down metal. Let me in, let me in, let me in, she chanted rapidly now, voice distorting, like a cassette tape warped by heat. Crystal stared straight ahead, gripping the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. It kept going for 5 minutes, then silence. We didn't speak for a long time after that. At 2:55 a.m., Crystal abruptly turned off the lights. The entire diner plunged into darkness. Rule 3, she whispered. I glanced at the clock. 2:59. Stand still. Don't talk. I stood behind the counter. Russell stood beside the grill. Crystal remained frozen near the sink. The silence was suffocating. At 3:01 a.m., something pressed against the glass window beside me. Not a hand, not a face. It was like a shape, a mass. Something wet-sounding slid slowly across the glass. I couldn't see it clearly in the dark, but I heard it. A slow, dragging smear, like someone mopping jelly across a window. Then whispering, not in English, not in human rhythm. It moved from window to window, sliding, pressing, searching. I clenched my teeth to stop them from chattering. My lungs burned from holding my breath. It circled the entire diner. At 3:16 a.m., it stopped. At 3:17 a.m., the lights flickered back on by themselves. Crystal exhaled shakily. Russell returned to flipping bacon like nothing happened. I stared out the window. The glass was clean, no smears, no marks, no evidence. I didn't ask, I didn't want answers, but I wasn't prepared for what came next, because Rule 4 wasn't far behind, and I didn't yet know the freezer knew my name. I told myself I wouldn't come back for a second shift. After everything I'd seen that night, the man in booth 9, the thing at the window, the voice begging from the back door, I should have quit. I should have packed up my things and found some other dead-end job where the worst thing I had to deal with was a rude customer. But desperation is a hell of a leash. My rent was due in 4 days. My gas bill was already past due. And worst of all, I didn't have any other options. Waffle House paid in cash at the end of every week. No waiting for direct deposits. No paperwork. No questions. So I came back. Shirley didn't even look surprised to see me. She just smirked and said, "Didn't scare you off then?" I didn't answer. I grabbed my apron and clocked in. Russell was already in the kitchen, flipping bacon like an emotionless machine. Crystal leaned against the counter, smoking her first, or maybe fifth, cigarette of the night. The jukebox played quietly in the corner, an old country song about heartbreak and whiskey. The sun was long gone. The highway outside was deserted. Everything felt suspended, like the world was holding its breath. I tried to shake off the unease by busying myself with pointless tasks, cleaning already clean tables, restocking sugar packets, straightening salt shakers that were already straight. But no matter what I did, one thing kept tugging at my mind. Rule 4. If you hear someone whispering your name from the kitchen freezer, don't answer. They're not talking to you. The freezer. I had managed to avoid going near it on my first shift. Crystal handled most of the supply runs, and Russell seemed content to stay glued to the grill. But now that I was back, there was no avoiding it forever. At 1:15 a.m., Crystal shouted from across the diner, "Hey, grab more waffle batter from the back." I froze. She pointed toward the supply freezer at the far end of the kitchen. "Bottom shelf, big plastic jug." I hesitated. She raised an eyebrow. "Unless you're too scared." That did it. I didn't want to look weak in front of her. So I marched into the kitchen, forcing myself not to look at the frost-coated door ahead of me. The freezer was bigger than I expected. Industrial. Silver metal door with a heavy latch and a frost-lined handle. A small round window at eye level was fogged from the inside. The air around it felt colder than the rest of the kitchen. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a freezer. A big, humming, stainless steel box full of frozen sausage and waffle batter. I grabbed the handle and pulled. A blast of icy air hit my face like a slap. The inside light flickered on, buzzing faintly. Metal shelves lined both walls, stacked with boxes, bags, and jugs. The cold bit into my skin instantly, sending goosebumps crawling across my arms. I stepped inside. The door swung shut behind me with a dull thud. I grabbed the nearest jug of waffle batter and turned to leave. That's when I heard it, a faint sound, so quiet I thought I imagined it. Then again, soft, drawn out, like breath over glass. Grant? My knees nearly gave out. No one knew my name here. I hadn't told it to anyone. My name tag just said staff, because Shirley hadn't gotten me a proper one yet. I froze, batter jug clutched tight in my hands. The voice came again, whispering from somewhere behind the stacks of frozen bread. Grant! It was slow, wet, like someone speaking through melting ice. My throat closed. My instincts screamed to run, but my body wouldn't move. I'm cold. I stared into the dim aisles between shelves, eyes straining. Something moved in the shadows. Not a person, not an animal, more like a shape, a pale blur shifting between boxes. The frost on the walls seemed to pulse with it, like ice breathing. The light above me flickered. Let me out. Every hair on my body stood on end. Somewhere in the haze of panic, Rule 4 flashed through my mind like a warning siren. If you hear someone whispering your name from the kitchen freezer, don't answer. They're not talking to you. I kept my mouth shut. My lungs burned as I held back the urge to gasp. Please. The voice was closer now, right behind me. I felt a coldness at my back that wasn't air. It was touch. Like fingers of mist brushing my spine. The jug of batter nearly slipped from my hands. Say something. The light flickered again. This time it didn't come back on. I was plunged into darkness. The whisper was no longer distant. It was right next to my ear. Talk to me. That broke the spell. I bolted. I didn't care that I rammed my shoulder into a shelf. I didn't care that something icy scraped against my arm as I ran. I burst through the door so hard it slammed against the wall with a bang that echoed across the kitchen. Russell turned slowly from the grill, eyes glazed but curious. Crystal stared at me from the counter, lips tight around her cigarette. You heard it, she said, not a question. I nodded shakily, unable to speak. She nodded back, like that was that. Like nearly being whispered to death by a ghost in a freezer was just part of the job. I set the batter jug on the counter with trembling hands. What is in there? I whispered. Neither of them answered. I didn't ask again. The rest of the shift felt wrong, heavier, like the air itself was watching me. At 2:13 a.m., a family walked in. Husband, wife, 2 kids rubbing sleep from their eyes, probably road tripping through the night. I forced a smile and handed them menus, praying nothing weird would happen while they were here, but weird has a way of ignoring prayers. While I poured their coffee, the jukebox clicked, then whirred, then started playing. Country music, as usual. But halfway through the song, it changed. No switch, no button press, no pause. The twangy vocals warped, slowing down like a cassette being melted. Then another song faded in. Not country, not music. It sounded like chanting. Low voices echoing like monks in a cave. The father looked around, confused. The mother rubbed her arms like she felt a chill. Crystal's head snapped toward the jukebox. Her cigarette fell from her lips. Unplug it, she hissed. I didn't move fast enough. The voices in the jukebox grew louder, layered, overlapping like a dozen people whispering into my ears at once. I could hear words now. Not English. Some old language with harsh rhythm and guttural vowels. It made my stomach twist just listening. The kids covered their ears. The mother stood abruptly, panic in her eyes. That snapped me into motion. I ran to the jukebox, ripped the cord from the wall. Silence. The father stood up, looking angry now. What the hell was that? He demanded. I opened my mouth to answer. But before I could, the front door chimed. Booth 9 was occupied. The man in the black suit sat perfectly still, pale hands folded, eyes fixed forward. The family didn't notice him. That terrified me more than anything. They walked right past him like he didn't exist. Crystal grabbed my arm, voice trembling for the first time since I met her. Take them their food. Don't look at him. Don't let them look at him. I moved like a robot, delivering plates without turning my head. As I set the waffles down, the man spoke. Not to me, to the little boy. Do you know what time it is? The boy blinked, looked at him. No. No. I held my breath. The boy opened his mouth. Then I slammed my tray down so hard that syrup splashed. Bathroom's that way, I shouted, louder than I needed to. The whole family jumped. The boy startled, looking at me instead of the man. Go. Now, I insisted. The mother grabbed his wrist and hurried him away. I didn't look at booth 9. I didn't have to. I could feel the man's stare burning into the side of my head like cold fire. He stayed until 12:53. Then he vanished. I didn't breathe properly until the family paid and left. The rest of the shift dragged like a nightmare you're half awake in. By dawn, I was numb. Crystal leaned against the counter, lighting her last cigarette of the night. Most people quit after the freezer, she said. I stared at the frost-stained door. I should. Will you? I didn't answer. She smiled sadly, like she already knew. As the sun crept over the trees outside, I noticed something that froze my blood. The light came in through the front windows, but the back windows? Still dark. Rule 6 flashed through my mind. If the sun rises and the windows are still dark, leave without clocking out. Crystal flicked ash onto the floor. You better go. What about you? She shrugged. I've been here too long. It won't let me leave anymore. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't clock out. I just walked out the front door, heart pounding. As I reached my car, I glanced back one last time. Through the diner window, I could see Crystal. She stood behind the counter, staring at me. But beside her, reflected faintly in the glass, was another figure. Tall, pale, suit black as night, watching me leave. I spent the entire day trying to convince myself not to go back. I paced my apartment like a caged animal. I smoked, even though I quit months ago. I sat in the shower long after the water went cold, knees pulled to my chest, head buzzing with everything I'd seen, the freezer whispering my name, the jukebox chanting, the man in booth 9, the sunrise that only touched the front windows. Most of all, Crystal's last words. I've been here too long. It won't let me leave anymore. She had said it so casually, like talking about the weather. What did she mean? What was it? And how long was too long? Before I could answer any of that, my phone buzzed. It was Shirley. Don't be late tonight. No greeting, no question, just an order. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I could quit, block her number, ignore it, never go near that diner again. But I knew the truth. It wasn't that simple anymore. Something had noticed me. Something inside that Waffle House knew my name, and I had the sickening feeling that if I didn't show up, it would come looking for me instead. So I went. When I pulled into the parking lot at 11:48 p.m., the first thing I noticed was that Crystal's car wasn't there. For a moment, I felt relief. Maybe she had finally escaped. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe leaving was possible. Then I walked inside. Crystal stood behind the counter. Her posture was stiff. Her eyes were locked straight ahead. Her cigarette hung from her lips, burning but unsmoked. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She didn't look at me. Crystal? I asked. No reaction. Russell stood at the grill, thus flipping hash browns with that same blank stare, but at least he blinked. At least he breathed. Crystal looked like she'd been carved from wax. Slowly I approached her. Hey, I said, waving a hand in front of her face. Nothing. Her pupils didn't track, her chest didn't rise. Then, without warning, she spoke, but not in her voice. You came back, she said. The words were flat, emotionless, spoken like a recording. I stumbled back. Crystal? Her lips didn't move again, but the voice continued, monotone and hollow. You came back. I swallowed hard. Are you okay? Too long. What? Too long, she repeated. Then slowly, her head turned toward me. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, reflective like glass. Don't stay. Her cigarette fell from her lips. Then she went still again, frozen, statue-like. I stood there, trembling, unsure whether to run or shake her back to life. Shirley emerged from the office before I could do either. Quit bothering her. That she snapped. I turned to her. Something's wrong with her. She's fine, Shirley snapped again. She's on standby. Standby? What the hell does that mean? It means, she said sharply, she's not scheduled to be present yet. She said it like that. Present. Like Crystal wasn't here. Only her body was. Something cold slithered down my spine. I looked back at Crystal. Her expression was empty. Not peaceful. Not asleep. Vacant. Like her soul had stepped out for a moment. Someone forgot to put up a sign. Shirley shoved a rag into my hand. Work. I glared at her. I'm not starting until you tell me what's going on. She stepped closer. Too close. I could smell nicotine and cheap perfume and something else. Something musty. Rotten. You're starting, she said quietly, or you won't get the choice again. I froze. Before I could respond, the door chimed. A man stepped in, not booth 9, not pale. Just a regular trucker. He sat at the counter and ordered coffee. I went to pour it, hands trembling. Crystal remained frozen. Russell kept cooking. Shirley retreated to the office. Everything looked normal on the outside. But I knew better now. Something was wrong with this place. Something lived inside it. Something that could hollow you out and leave your body standing there like a mannequin. The night dragged on painfully slow. At 12:13 a.m., booth 9 was filled, of course. I didn't look. At 12:53 he vanished, of course. But that night something else happened, something new. At exactly 2 a.m., the kitchen door creaked. Not the freezer, the back hallway, the door that led to the storage closet. Except no one had opened it. It swung slowly, methodically, like it had been pushed by a breeze. Except there was no breeze back there, no vent, no draft, just darkness. From that darkness, footsteps echoed, slow, heavy, dragging slightly. I froze mid-table wipe. Russell stopped flipping pancakes. Even Crystal's glassy eyes twitched toward the sound. Shirley's voice drifted from the office. Grant, Rule 7. I swallowed. There's only 6 rules. Silence. Then she spoke again, louder. Rule 7. If one comes through the storage hallway, don't let it see you breathing. What? Before I could react, the footsteps grew louder, closer. Something massive shuffled into the kitchen. I couldn't see it yet, but I heard it, wet, like meat slapping tile, breathing, heavy, thick, like lungs filled with tar. I dove behind the counter, pressing my face against the cold tile floor, forcing my breath shallow and silent. The air grew damp. The smell of rot crawled into my nose. I heard it move into the dining area. Something dragged across the floor, not feet, hands, fingers scraping linoleum. A low groan rattled through the diner. Wet, gurgling, choked. I risked a glance under the counter. I saw a hand. Not human. Too long, too many joints. Skin gray and blistered like overboiled meat. Nails black and cracked. It pulled itself forward, inch by inch, like something crawling out of a grave. My lungs screamed for air. Don't breathe. Don't breathe. It stopped moving. I heard it sniff, not like a dog, like a person trying to clear phlegm. It was inches from me, inches. Then a wet cough, a sound like someone drowning on land. Then silence, long, heavy silence. Then slowly, it crawled away, back down the hallway. The storage door creaked shut. I didn't move for a long time. Eventually, I stood on trembling legs. Russell resumed flipping bacon like nothing happened. Crystal was still frozen. Shirley emerged from the office like she hadn't even noticed. She handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it. There was one sentence written in red ink. You understand now. I looked at her. Understand what? She lit a cigarette and smiled without warmth. You don't work here, she said. You belong here. I backed away. No, I don't. You will. I'm leaving. She shrugged. You can, but you'll come back. They all do. They? She pointed toward the booths. Not booth 9. Booth 4, which had been empty seconds ago, was now filled. A woman sat there, young, blonde, wearing an old Waffle House uniform. Her skin was gray, lips blue, eyes sunken as if she hadn't blinked in years. She stared at me, not blinking, not breathing, just watching. Shirley spoke softly beside me. Want to meet the ones who never clocked out? I couldn't speak, because behind her, more started appearing. Booth 2, Booth 6, Booth 5. Men, women, all wearing old uniforms, some with dried blood on their aprons, some with frostbite burns on their faces, some with black veins crawling up their necks, all staring at me, silent, waiting. Shirley leaned in. They came back, she whispered. Just like you will. I stepped backward, then another step. Then I ran. I didn't clock out. I didn't look back. But as I reached my car, I saw something in my mirror. Through the diner window, rows of dead employees, all turned toward me, all smiling now. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like 2 pieces of dead wood. The parking lot lights smeared above me, long yellow fingers that reached out and then recoiled. I didn't look back at the diner until I was in my car, slamming the door and gulping air like I'd been underwater for hours. When I finally looked, I thought I'd imagined the whole thing. The Waffle House sat where it always had, windows dark, neon sign blinking like a tired eye. For a second, I let myself believe I could outrun whatever it was that lived there. Then, in the front window, I saw them. Rows of bodies, sitting upright in booths and at the counter, faces pale and waxen. The old waitress with the frozen smile, the man with the frostbitten nose, a kid I half remembered from a faded help wanted poster. They weren't moving. They didn't need to. They stared at me like people stare at a photograph of someone they're trying to remember. And then they smiled. Not the small, remembering smile you give an old friend. Something wider, empty, waiting. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. The engine sounded too loud. The world felt too sharp at the edges. I started the car. The gravel of the parking lot ground under the tires. I pulled away before the guilt of leaving them behind could form any coherent thought. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would be audible to anyone watching. I drove until the Waffle House was a dot in my rearview mirror. Then further, until the highway blurred into an endless ribbon and the trees swallowed the building's neon. I kept driving until my eyes burned and the road started to make no sense. Then I pulled off at a truck stop and slept in the car with the engine running, as if the hum would be a shield. I didn't really sleep. I drifted and woke constantly, listening for the sound of silverware or the jukebox, waiting for a voice to whisper my name. Morning came in a gray wash, and I realized I hadn't eaten. I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't told anyone where I was. When the sun came up enough for me to navigate, I went back. The Waffle House was exactly where I'd left it, like a bruise on the roadside. The parking lot was empty. The front window reflected the sky, ordinary and indifferent, but from the inside the booths looked like a graveyard. They were all there again, spectral, patient. I lingered in my car, trying to build a plan with fragments of thoughts. Burn the place down had been the first, stupid idea. It felt too final, like violence applied to a wound whose shape I didn't understand. Free Crystal had been the second, because whatever the reason she was stuck here, I couldn't just leave her to it. Find out the rules, the source, the thing beneath the tiles. That was the third, the soberest, the one that made the most sense and the least progress. I put the car in park and went in like someone walking to a dentist's chair, slow and certain I would regret it afterward. The bell chimed when I opened the door, too bright in the morning light. Shirley was behind the counter, tying an apron, cigarette ash flicking onto a paper towel. She didn't look up. "You came back," she said. "No," I lied, though the truth was simpler. "I couldn't stay away." She shrugged casually. "You shouldn't have left. You know that, right?" "I know a lot of things now." She glanced at the booths and the counter, then looked at me the way someone inspects a small spoiled fruit. "Most don't last," she said. "Most come back thinking they can fix it. Most think they're different." "Different how?" "You're stubborn," she said. "Stubborn is useful. Curiosity kills, but stubbornness keeps you breathing long enough to be useful." She tapped a cigarette out of the pack and lit it. The smoke made a soft halo around her head like a bad halo. "But you'll need to learn the rest of the rules." "More rules?" She smiled without humor. "There are always more." She handed me a second index card. The edges were stained with something dark. The handwriting was the same red script as before, but more crowded, like someone had pressed too hard with a pen. Rule 7 read, "If one comes through the storage hallway, don't let it see you breathing." Rule 8, "Never, under any circumstances, touch another employee's apron after midnight." Rule 9, "If your name is written on a menu, burn the menu before dawn." Rule 10, "If you feel the floors breathe under your feet, count to 7 and step back." I read them repeatedly, as if the act of repetition could make the papers less foreign. Stuffed inside the apron was a small, tarnished watch with the minute hand missing. Its face was cracked and full of hairline fractures. Shirley peered at it and handed it to me without comment. The time on the watch was stuck at 3:06. "Keep it," she said. "It's a reminder." "Of what?" "That time doesn't mean what you think it does here," she said. "It folds." I opened my mouth to ask more, then closed it. Asking had a cost I didn't want to pay. Instead, I asked the one quiet question that had been eating at me since the freezer. "What's in the freezer?" I asked. Shirley's eyes went nowhere and everything at once, like a cat that watched both the hallway and the sky. "The freezer remembers," she said finally. "It keeps names and memories. We try to keep it closed. Sometimes it gets hungry." "Hungry for what?" "For attention," she said. "For promises. For people to call it by name. It likes the sound of a living thing saying their name into cold air." "You said the people sitting in the booths belonged there. You said they never clocked out. Why?" Her smile thinned. "The Waffle House is a place between shifts," she said. "People come here in the middle of the night when their lives are half light. Some of them linger. The building remembers them. Some say the highway laid itself down for a reason. Some say the diner was built on ground that remembers things no one wants to say out loud. You're telling me this like it's normal. She laughed once, a brittle sound. Normal is a word people use to keep from looking at the thing under their bed. We all make deals, Grant. They're not all fair. Deals? You give us the hours, the loyalty, the forgetting. It gives you work when no one else will. You make the rule that you can't leave. Someone has to open the door. Someone has to keep it warm. She tapped the counter with 2 fingers. It's a cycle. You mean the Waffle House is alive? It's connected, she corrected, to other things, the road, the jukebox, the freezer. They sing to each other. They trade. Trade what? Time, she said. Names. Breath. People. My chest tightened. The words sat heavy and metallic in my head. Why did they smile? I asked. Why were they smiling at me when I left? Shirley looked down, not at me, but through me. Because you saw them. Because you acknowledged them. And that matters. It's how it starts. I felt the walls of the diner close in. The booths were a circle of cold faces. The chairs were empty, but their weight was a promise. I thought of Crystal, waxen and still, like someone's hand had pressed pause on her life. I thought of the freezer whispering my name. I thought of the storage hallway and the thing that crawled on its hands. What can I do? I asked. How do I stop it? Shirley's cigarette burned lower. She rubbed ash into the paper towel as if it were prayer. You don't stop it, she said. You survive it. Rules are how you survive. Break them and you give it beginnings. Beginnings? Beginnings is what it likes. The first time something notices you is delicious to it. Each rule you keep is a lid. Each rule you break is a gap. I thought of the day I signed the paper without reading it. The day I took a job because I had to. How small that seemed now. Like folding a piece of paper into a boat and expecting it to stay afloat in a storm. I'm not staying, I said. You say that now, Shirley said, and it sounded tired. But the Waffle House has ways of letting in what left. It's patient. It's hungry for the ones who don't understand it. You can keep coming back thinking you're rescuing someone, or you can walk away and hope it forgets your name. As if to punctuate her words, the jukebox started to play, a slow country song that warped into another rhythm until the air felt off balance. I flinched. The man in the black suit was in booth 9, of course, as if he had taken a scheduled seat at a table no one else was allowed to sit at. You should go, Shirley said softly. But if you do anything stupid, if you try to touch them, if you try to drag them out, don't say I didn't warn you. I looked at Crystal. Her jaw tightened for a millisecond, like someone had wound a clock and let it go. I went to her and reached out just to test, to touch a warm shoulder, to see if the wax would be like human skin. My fingers met cold. An internal click sounded in my head, like a door locking in some other room. Crystal's eyes snapped toward me, and for a single moment there was a flicker behind them, an acknowledgement, not from her but from whatever moved through her. It felt like the brush of a finger across the back of my neck, the memory of something I had not yet done. I withdrew my hand as if it had been burned. Shirley's face softened in a way that made me think of compassion, or the illusion of it. You can try to pull someone free, she said, but it often takes more than hands. It takes a name that will not be said again, a promise you'll keep even if you forget it. I don't have those things to give. I'll find them, I said, though I didn't know who or what I meant. Maybe you will, she said. I left then the only way I could, running. My car began to rattle like it wanted to come apart under me. The diner's neon bled into the morning, the colors softening into a bruise. The booths looked like mouths now, open and patient. As I turned the corner of the parking lot, I glanced back, stupidly hoping they had gone, or that I'd misremembered. But the window framed them like a tableau, a grotesque family photo. They were all looking at me, and they were smiling. I didn't stop until the highway blurred, and I didn't stop then either. I kept driving until the trees swallowed the neon and the sky turned a lidless gray. I parked where the rest areas were empty and the wind had no directions to carry. Later that night, the image of their smiles haunted me in ways I couldn't name. It wasn't just the way their mouths stretched. It was the sense of completion in their expressions, as if they had achieved the end of something and were content. They looked like people who'd finally been allowed to sit down. I slept a little. sprawled across the passenger seat, and when I woke, the sun had bled into the horizon, and I felt as if something else had woken with me. Leaving didn't change anything. The Waffle House was not a place you abandoned like a job you quit. It was a thing that collected attendance. It kept track. And I now knew with a cold, terrible clarity that I didn't just work there. I had been noticed. I had been logged. The Waffle House held a list. It knew my name. I drove home with my hands clenched tight around the wheel, the index card of rules burning a hole in my pocket. I was tired, but sleep felt dangerous now. The house was not empty enough for me to rest easy. I walked into my apartment and sat on the couch, every light on, expecting the next step of the design to reveal itself. When night came, I went to bed with the covers pulled to my chin and the rules on my mind like nails. I tried to make myself believe there was a logic, a loophole even, that would let me fix this. I wanted to find a way to keep the lid on whatever it was that had opened its mouth at the Waffle House. But something shifted in the dark. I thought I heard the far-off sound of a jukebox, slowed and deepened. I thought I heard silverware. It was probably the building settling, or a truck passing on the highway, or the echo of a man's voice who wanted nothing but to be recognized. I lay there and waited for morning, but the sun did not seem like a promise anymore. It felt like a question that could not be answered. When I finally drifted off, it was with the feeling that the Waffle House had made a note of me. And notes, when kept in certain places, tend to get returned. Home sleep didn't come easy. It came like a thief, slow and unwanted, slipping in between the cracks of exhaustion and dread. One moment I was staring at the ceiling, every light in the apartment blazing like a fortress, and the next I was gone, caught in some space between waking and whatever waited beneath it. I didn't dream. Not in the way people mean when they say dream. There weren't pictures or people or places. There was sound, a slow sizzle, like grease on a griddle, a faint clink of utensils. A song, somewhere far down a hallway I couldn't see. A song I knew. The jukebox. My body jerked awake before my eyes did. I lay there frozen, the dark pressing against my eyelids like a hand. I didn't open them. I didn't want to. My breathing was too loud. I tried to quiet it. I tried to pretend I was still asleep. Because I knew, without knowing how I knew, that I was not alone. Something was in the room. There was weight in the air, like someone standing beside the bed. I could feel it. Not warmth, not breath, but presence. Cold attention. Watching. Waiting to see if I would acknowledge it. Rule 7 flashed through my head like a warning light. If one comes through the storage hallway, don't let it see you breathing. There was no storage hallway here. This wasn't the Waffle House. This was my apartment, my bedroom, my blanket, my bed, my floorboard, one single creak, slow, deliberate. I stopped breathing altogether. Something moved closer. I could feel the mattress dip just slightly, like someone had leaned a hand on the edge of it. My chest pulsed painfully, urging me to inhale, but I didn't dare. Not one breath, not one sound. Then a whisper. Not in my ear, not in the air, inside my bones. Grant. It said my name like it was tasting it, slow, delighted, like the freezer had when I called Crystal. Something icy brushed my arm. Not like a touch, more like condensation breathing against my skin. I snapped. I didn't mean to. I didn't choose to. Instinct wrenched my body upright, air exploding into my lungs in a sharp gasp. The room was empty. No one stood beside the bed. The doorway was clear. The closet was closed. Nothing had moved, but the temperature was wrong. My breath fogged in front of me. In my bedroom, I swung my legs off the bed, bare feet touching the floor. Freezing. Not cold. Frozen. Like standing on the metal floor of the freezer. A low hum filled the room. It wasn't coming from anything physical. It wasn't my AC. It wasn't a truck outside. It was something deeper. Like metal vibrating. Like walls breathing. Rule 10, if you feel the floors breathe under your feet, count to 7 and step back. I hadn't counted. I had already stepped. Something moved beneath the boards, slow, swelling, like something pressing from underneath. I stumbled back and slammed into the nightstand. My phone clattered to the floor. I made a dive for it, fingers shaking as I fumbled to turn on the flashlight. The beam cut across the room and landed on something standing in the far corner. A tall figure, still, too still, all black. No face, no outline of features, just a shape as though someone had cut a human silhouette out of a starless sky and glued it there. Booth 9, the man in the black suit. Except now there was no suit, no details, just absence, shaped like a person. I couldn't scream. My vocal cords felt like someone had unplugged them. The figure didn't move, but its head tilted, just slightly, like recognition, like a smile without a face. Then, clink, not from the corner, from behind me. I spun around. My kitchen light was on. I hadn't turned it on. I could see the reflection of silverware on the counter, a fork, shifting, slowly scraping itself across the surface with no hand holding it, like it was remembering muscle memory. I backed into the wall. Something caught under my foot. I looked down. A menu. Crisp, laminated, Waffle House. My name was written across it. In red. Not printed. Written. Fresh. Still wet. Rule 9. If your name is written on a menu, burn the menu before dawn. Dawn was hours away. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely grip it. My brain rattled with instinct. Kitchen. Lighter. Stove. Then, too late. A voice spoke from the living room. Not loud, not whispering, just normal, conversational, casual, male, southern, pleased. You ready to clock back in, Grant? I knew that voice. The cook. The one who always stayed in the kitchen. The one I had never seen leave it. The one who sang to himself while flipping bacon that didn't sizzle. Slowly, I turned. He stood in the hallway between me and the door, not blocking it, just standing there, apron, grease-stained, smile too wide, skin too pale, eyes too kind. The kindness made it worse. Long break, buddy, he said, but you know how it is. If you walk off mid-shift, they send someone to fetch you. I'm not. I don't work there anymore. He chuckled, a low, bubbling sound like something cooking. You do if your name's on the menu. My hands tightened around it. Without thinking, I tore it. Straight down the middle. His smile didn't fade. He just tilted his head. Shouldn't do that, he said softly. Paper cuts both ways. The torn halves of the menu curled in my hands and bled. Not ink, blood, dripping down my wrists. Warm, I screamed. He didn't move. Now why'd you go and make yourself a liability, he sighed. Makes it messy. I lunged past him. He didn't stop me, didn't chase, didn't turn, just watched. I burst out of the apartment barefoot, sprinting across the pavement like a wild animal. I didn't know where I was going. My car, somewhere bright, somewhere loud, somewhere human. I didn't stop until I reached the street. Then I froze, because I could see it. From the middle of the road. There at the end of the block, sitting at the corner of my suburban neighborhood, was the Waffle House. Not a Waffle House. The Waffle House. Exact same angle, exact same flickering neon, booths in the same place, blinds half open, like it had been waiting for me to notice. The sign buzzed. WAFLEHOUSN. Open 24 hours. I stood there in the middle of the street, chest heaving, bare feet bleeding, hands still wet. And I understood. I hadn't escaped. You don't leave the Waffle House. You expand its territory. If it writes your name, you're franchised. I always imagined that the end would be loud. I thought if I ever got out of that cursed Waffle House, it would be with shattering glass and roaring screams, metal bending and alarms blaring. But as I stood at the edge of the dining floor that final night, looking across the empty booths and flickering lights, I realized something unsettling. Escaping wasn't going to be violent. It was going to be quiet. The place was almost peaceful, in the way a morgue might be peaceful. Still, motionless. A hush that didn't come from calm, but from patience. As if everything inside the Waffle House, the neon, the grease-stained walls, the stools that spun without ever squeaking, was waiting for me to try. The rules were still there, taped to the counter, greasy fingerprints staining the edges. I didn't need to read them anymore. They were etched into my thoughts like scars into bone. Rule 1, always greet the lone customer after midnight. Rule 2, never turn your back on the man in booth 9. Rule 3, if Crystal cries in the walk-in freezer, do not open the door. Rule 4, when something knocks on the windows from outside, do not acknowledge it. Rule 5, at 3:33 a.m. the kitchen will go silent. Whatever walks through the back door, let it pass. I had followed them faithfully. I had survived by obedience. But I knew now that rules weren't there to protect me. They were there to keep it contained. To make sure I played my part in feeding the house, shift after shift, soul after soul. But tonight, I wasn't going to follow them. Not fully. I wasn't going to break them loudly. That was the mistake others made, the ones who vanished before me. They rebelled like martyrs, thinking defiance was strength, but this place didn't fear strength. It feared patience. It feared silence. So I decided I would leave the same way the horrors entered, with quiet steps, with no words spoken, no breath wasted, just like it taught me. The clock read 2:57 a.m. Too early. I couldn't leave yet. Not until I saw her. I walked toward the freezer. I didn't hear crying this time. No faint sobbing, no scratching at the metal. Just cold air seeping under the door, that's touching my shoes like a timid animal. I opened it. She was sitting on the floor, knees tucked to her chest, her Waffle House visor sitting crooked on her head. Crystal looked the same, that same soft face, those tired eyes. But something about her posture was different. She didn't seem trapped. She seemed aware. She looked at me, and for the first time since I met her, I saw recognition. Not of my name or my voice, but recognition of herself. As if some piece of her that had long been buried finally rose to the surface. "You're leaving," she said quietly. A statement, not a question. I nodded. She forced a small smile. "Good, you should." I knelt beside her. "I can get you out too, if you just—" "No," she said gently, "you can't." I swallowed. "Don't say that. It's true. I'm not all here." My throat tightened. "Because they won't let you be. No." Her eyes flicked toward the ceiling, toward the vents, the walls, the place itself. "Because I stayed too long." She reached up slowly and fixed my collar like a mother might. Her hand lingered there, trembling slightly. "You have to go while it still lets you." Every instinct in me screamed to argue, to refuse, to drag her out if I had to. But I had learned something important in my time here. This place didn't fight you when you disobeyed. It waited until you doubted yourself. I couldn't doubt. "Will I ever see you again?" I asked. Crystal took a moment before answering. "Maybe, if you dream loud enough." I stood. My hand brushed her shoulder. "You don't deserve this." She almost laughed. "No one deserves anything. Not really. Some of us just end up in the wrong place longer than we should." That hurt more than anything. I stepped back. She didn't cry when I closed the freezer door. I think that was her final gift to me. 3:32 a.m. The kitchen went silent 1 full minute early. It was giving me a head start. I moved. No jacket, no bag, nothing that would weigh me down. I crossed the dining floor with steady strides, resisting every instinct that told me to run. I passed the booths where shadows had watched me for months. Past the window where the knocking sometimes came. Past booth 9. I didn't look. I didn't breathe. I reached the front door. It was unlocked. Not even a creak as I pushed it open. The cool Georgia night met me like a familiar stranger. No headlights in the parking lot. No cicadas. No wind. Even crickets seemed too afraid to speak. The air felt thick, like the world was waiting to see if I would make a sound. I stepped out. The door closed behind me with a soft click. I didn't turn back. My car sat exactly where I left it. I opened the door, got in, and placed my hands on the wheel. But I didn't start it yet. I stared ahead at the empty road. I half expected to see something in the rearview mirror. A silhouette, a face, crystals, maybe, or something worse. But the mirror showed nothing but the restaurant behind me, still, silent, watching. I turned the key. The engine hummed to life. Only then did I feel my heartbeat again. I pulled out of the lot. No booming roar of thunder, no explosion of lights behind me, no hands reaching from the darkness to drag me back. Just asphalt stretching forward, that swallowing my tires in silence. I didn't look back, not once. Miles passed. Trees lined the road like sentries. My hand stayed locked on the wheel. Every so often, I checked the clock on the dash. 3:41 a.m., 3:49 a.m., 3:57 a.m. Some part of me kept expecting something to change, for the world to bend, for the road to loop back, for the Waffle House to appear again in front of me, bright and buzzing, as if I had never left. But it didn't. I was free. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. It wasn't until a few hours later, when dawn began to brush the horizon, that I dared to slow the car. I pulled over beneath an old pine tree and killed the engine. My whole body trembled. Not from fear, from absence. The silence outside was different from the silence inside that restaurant. Out here, it was natural. It was wild. It wasn't waiting for me to speak. It was letting me exist. I got out of the car and leaned against the hood. The sky was pale, soft pinks bleeding into faded blue. For the first time in months, I saw a sunrise, and then I heard it, very faint, barely recognizable, not in my ears, not in the air, in my mind, a whisper, "Keep going." I didn't cry, but I almost did. I looked toward the horizon. Then, barely louder than breath, I whispered back, "I will." If you made it this far, congratulations. You survived the night with me. But before you go, let me ask you something. Would you take a night shift at a Waffle House like that? Let me know down in the comments, if you're brave enough. And hey, if you enjoyed this horrifying journey, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who loves a good scare, and smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Sleep tight, if you can.